Gururaj has so many hats, he could have a wardrobe of his own just based on the various roles he has excelled at. But I will try. First off, Mr. Ravi Gururaj is a technology entrepreneur, being the founder and CEO of QuickPod.com, where he builds innovative last-mile logistics solutions for the e-commerce industry. He's previously founded 5 startups, 3 of which were in the US, 2 of which exited to public NASDAQ companies. Ravi has angel invested in more than 25 innovative startups, and also over his career has held executive positions at global technology firms like Citrix, Trilogy, and Intel. Ravi is an elected member of the NASSCOM Executive Council in his role as a leader and a mentor of the industry, and is the current president of the Indus Entrepreneurs, Bangalore. He serves on the Indian Venture Capital Association Council, is chief mentor at Reliance Industries' Next Gen X program, serves on the Startup Councils of the Government of Karnataka and CII, and is co-chair of the Penn and Wharton Club of Bangalore and Harvard Business School's Alumni Angels India chapter. Ravi received his MBA as a Baker Scholar from Harvard Business School and graduated with honors as Benjamin Franklin Scholar from the University of Pennsylvania in the Jerome Fisher Program in Management and Technology, receiving a BSc in Computer Science and Engineering from the Moore School and a BSc in Finance from the Wharton School. He is also an exchange research scholar at the University of Edinburgh and schooled at La Martiniere for boys in Kolkata. Now you can see what I meant. And with no further ado, I would request you to join me in welcoming Mr. Ravi Gururaj to the stage.
Good morning, and that was a most generous introduction. I think, I approach it with trepidation since a previous speaker talked about firing her Ivy League associates. But good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. My talk today will kind of hopefully shed some light on the startup ecosystem, the opportunity that is India. I'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing across our landscape in terms of just the digital economy, right? And I think, there were questions in the previous panel about the relevance of ITech law, and I think it could not be more relevant than it is than today. The need, I think, for understanding and trying to shape regulation is just going to be tremendous going forward, and I think there's huge opportunity there. Let me start by just giving you a feel for what's going on across the ecosystem. And this is my 6th startup. I'll just tell you a little bit about it. It's very hard doing startups. It's even harder doing startups in India, I find. We're trying to build last mile infrastructure and plowing away at it. But it's easy to start. It's hard to grow, and it's even harder to exit, right? And having been through that a couple of times, I can tell you the full life cycle takes a lot out of you, and but it's most enjoyable, most productive. So this is the locker network we're building across India. It's like for those of you who are familiar with lockers around the world, we're building a network here out of India that is available to all the e-commerce companies. That's all I'll tell you about what I'm doing. Big numbers. Now I'm going to fly through these slides. I will make a version of this available after for those that may be interested. It's actually coming out of a deck that NASSCOM did with a couple of other folks where we do a research study every year and aggregate all the data. There's about 100 different slides, but I just cherry-picked a few from there. But this is where I'll kind of spend a little bit of time. There's a lot going on in the ecosystem in terms of innovative models for large companies trying to dance with startups. I think this may be an area where many of y'all will touch, either on either side of that equation, representing startups, representing accelerators. It's a very rich area for innovation. In my role at the various organizations I'm at, I get to meet a lot of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies who come through India and come through Bangalore. And I often ask why. They say we have a center here, and that's true. But then why are you coming and meeting startups and trying to understand the ecosystem? Because they're really worried about disruption, right, in some sense. And this is more than just a cliche, bullet point in their board meetings. They're actually answerable for a good plan. While disruption was a good thing to say, I'm trying to figure out what's going to disrupt me 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Today, you need to have action in the ground. You need to have actual programs that are working. So they're really looking to amp up that. And they've, I think, universally recognized that it's not going to be happening organically in-house. It's going to have to be a combination of things. In-house initiatives, inorganic growth of various kinds, and relationships and partnerships and building a web. And this is some of stuff that's happening just in India in terms of just the relationships, the different types of programs that are being executed. And it's a little bit of an eye chart, but it's very rich, and you can see all the logos up there. There are 800 different MNCs that operate out of just Bangalore. And I can tell you, just tonight I go to an event that Target is running, where they're nurturing a bunch of startups. A couple of days ago, a few of us were at another event with another large MNC that was running, a similar kind of program. And it's on a weekly basis. There are 2 or 3 of these where several startups are being nurtured by these large companies, and that's great. I think there's a huge opportunity to leverage both ways. When I talk to startups, I tell them, you need to be scaling up and thinking like a large company. When I talk to large companies, I tell them, you need to be as agile and open-minded and flexible and fast-moving as a startup, right? Because both really want to achieve positive attributes that each have, And one's looking to scale, the other's looking to move fast and innovate, right? And I think that's the thing. Now, let me just walk you through very fast the India software. It's the software capital of the world, but IT services is what you probably are most familiar with. And there's a bit of a slowdown there for sure, because that industry needs to reinvent itself. It needs to think beyond what the model is today. And it needs to be ready for the next generation of IT services, whatever that is going to be. It's going to be a combination of various things that are not exactly the model, the formula that's worked for today. The formula that's worked over the last 15 years has been fantastic. It's delivered us 147, 174, depending on how you cut it. $1 billion industry out of India represents, almost 8-9% of GDP. That's fantastic, but to keep the momentum going, we'll have to redefine and rethink and recast. And we have a few years to get that done, but it's going to come. The other area that we're starting to see good traction is SaaS. This is a real, a vibrant industry that's building up, and it's nowhere near where the IT services industry is, but this is a huge opportunity because you can really execute for the globe with a model that scales out of India, with a set of kind of a fabric of peer support, capital support, industry support, and be able to execute globally very successfully out of India. So huge opportunity. I think some of the points, obviously, cost is the last thing. IT services cost was the first thing, I think, that people came for. In SaaS, cost will be the last thing, but it'll be an element. It'll be much more about really, in some cases, being a fast follower, in some cases being smarter at marketing, in some cases being more brilliant in the product you build out, right? And then in some cases, it's just there are waves of SaaS products because of the technology changes. You can just keep, kind of iteratively releasing, iteratively building companies in that space, and really go to market very efficiently from remotely, i.e., not necessarily in the global markets physically. A few of the companies that have done well, I think this is just the starters. These companies have been built over the last 10 years, some of them as older even than 10 years. But we're going to start to see real rocket ships that in 3 years can get the same traction these companies took 14 or 15 years, only because the timing is right, the right elements are in place, and I think because of those ingredients in place, you'll start to see real rapid growth. There's this goal India has to get to the $10 trillion economy, and I'll just fly through some of the areas that are the growth opportunities, right? And these are, we have this saying in India, roti kapda makan, marriage, it's Bollywood and cricket, and that's what people spend money on, right? And some of the elements of the ecosystem, obviously, nobody thinks about insurance. They sometimes think about health in the after fact, ex post. But generally, you think about the other stuff you think you spend your money on, including housing. Huge opportunities in each of these areas. And again, all of them are going to contribute massively towards this $10 trillion economy. And I'll walk you through some of them in more detail in the next few by sector. So agriculture, here's where you'll start to see. 58% of the population still depends on agriculture. And, there's a whole bunch of companies going after this, in terms of startups. I've just got an eye chart of a few here. And they're doing all kinds of things from dairy management to, farm to fork, to various elements of even the blockchain tapping into the supply chain. And, then the companies going after the cold chain, companies going after, just disrupting the current existing fragmented, unorganized sectors, right? In a way that has never been seen before. And I think huge opportunity, IoT especially playing a role there. Again, this is a long-term play. I don't see anything moving the needle in the couple of years, but I see companies being built that are really significant and lots of interest from lots of globals in this area. Healthcare is clearly, huge. You'll see the per capita spent on healthcare is really low in India, even compared to other countries around the world, even in Asia. So huge opportunity. I think this will go up as people, insurance is still almost non-existent for everybody in India, but it's going to come in play in a big way over the next decade, and that will change the dynamic, I think, in terms of how the industry is viewed. Again, I'll just, in the interest of time, just keep going. Education. We're a very aspirational society. Everybody wants to go to the best schools, get the best education they can. This is the one thing that they're willing to spend, even sell their homes for, to get done for their children and others. And that creates huge opportunity. We've seen several companies there go after that space. Again, this is just, again, a sampling, and I'm not suggesting that any of these are top 10 companies or anything like that, but they represent some of the companies that have got funded massively in this space. So retail, I think you understand that. Just take a look at the big, tall thing is the unorganized sector. If you looked at the same chart, even for China, it'll be about half. That blue stack will be halfway down. If you look at it for Europe and North America, that blue stack will be all the way down in terms of unorganized. So huge opportunity again. I think we've started to just see the tip of the iceberg there. And one of the big, obviously, I'm sure you're all familiar, is the acquisition of Flipkart. Gave a big fillip to the kind of the startup ecosystem, because that was a big bottleneck. Exits have been an issue in India. For those of you who are involved in M&A transactions, liquidity is certainly a problem. We don't have access to the public markets yet in any significant way for tech companies because of various restrictions and norms. But I think that will open up slowly. And M&A as well from the big platform players has been limited, but starting to show light in terms of things. Food is huge, obviously, anywhere. But look at the growth that's happening in food. It's now, this is, again, I think disposable incomes are going up. I think the middle class is growing. It's a reflection of that. And that's why you see, companies have now, I think, at least 3 startups have raised over $1 billion to go after food in India, right? And this is, I'm talking about digital delivery of food, cataloging, online cataloging, various things like that. Financial services, again, lending. We've got lots of savings in India. It's all locked in gold and land and immovable assets of various kinds. You're going to get 2 things. One, liquidity of that, in some sense, some way of securitizing that. And then you're going to get a whole bunch of lending happen as well, efficient lending, hopefully. And this is what's really driving the fintech industry. While we talk about wallets, we talk about frictionless transactions, I think that's great. But I think it's really the lending to the SMBs, the lending to various entities that need cash flow balancing. That's what's going to really kickstart, I think, the industry in a big way. Again, a few companies here you'll see from all the way from wallets to portals that help you find the best insurance and brokerages and things like that. Insurance, again, huge opportunity. I mean, these are industries. If you assume India is going to be a 4th or 3rd or 4th largest economy 15 years from now, going to be a $10 trillion economy. Each of these industries is right now still in its infancy in some sense, and it's going to grow dramatically. So, just huge opportunities across the board in each of these areas. If you just see relative to where the US is and China is, massive opportunity again. Media, I think Netflix is now India is probably its largest platform, thanks to the geo effect. For those of you who are not familiar, Jio is a new telecom infrastructure that was put in place at extremely attractive price points with extremely high bandwidth and daily usage. Indian consumers today consume more video and bits per day than any consumer anywhere, including China, at this point. And so that's, again, a massive recognition of the middle band of consumers, digital consumers. There's not a lot of monetization going on there yet, but there's huge consumption. And hopefully monetization follows consumption, right? Logistics is another area. 10% of Indian GDP is logistics, so everything we buy, a good 10% of that is represented in the logistics cost. Huge opportunity, again, to clean that whole industry up, to bring digital transformation there. Okay, so crystal ball gazing. I mean, I wanted to keep this to about 20 minutes. I was speaking at a conference for an offsite that a large European law firm had here in Bangalore. And one of the exercises, they asked 3 or 4 different folks from outside to come in and tell them what the law firms would look like 15 years from now, right? And they asked each of us to just brainstorm in a room outside and then put a slide together. So I'm going to share a little cleaned up version of that slide. There were a lot of edgy cases there, but I've cleaned it up just to share with you what my perspective is, right, on that. So, this is one of the things you should think about, which is, any occupation that requires kind of analysis, subtle interpretation, strategizing, consensus building, persuasion. Paradoxically, these are the areas that will be more susceptible to AI, ML, big data analytics, all that. You would think, tech is going to get that factory worker out of there, right? You're going to kill the line worker in the factory. It's actually, these are the jobs that will be most at stake, I think, because AI will at some point, it'll be Alexa, tell me what I should do, right? It'll be, should I go to the lawyer, or is this lawyer better than that lawyer, right? Or is this, they just give me the opinion and print it out on the printer or file it already, right? And we're getting there, and we're getting there faster than you might think. So that leads to a lot of implications, I think, One is, I think, the law firms, I think, will, and I'm giving you my founder perspective, it's not about just legal counsel, it's about business counsel too, right? And it's really, it's like when I enter a business, you need to be there at the table when I'm ideating that business. You need to be there when I first structure the company. As we can see, just with the e-commerce structuring going on with the big giants now, Flipkart, Amazon, in a flip of a switch in December, they suddenly get a new regulation, right? And now they're all in a tizzy for the last, they have to implement that by Feb 1st. Now, obviously you need a bunch of lawyers to help you do that, to figure out what's going on. But, there's just new business models that, in terms of regulations haven't been defined. What's the gray zone? How do I build this in a way that I can navigate today and make myself resilient from regulatory changes downstream, right? The business owner needs to be at the table with the lawyer at that time, I think, So it's much more about this. It's about relationships, lifelong relationships, at least through the firm. It's not about transactions only. All my previous really interactions in the last 20 years have been transactional. When you get into a deal, when you first fund it, you have lawyers on both sides of the table. Every time you do a round, you have lawyers at the table. If you have some issue in between, you have lawyers at the table. When you exit, you certainly have lots of lawyers at the table. But then, you don't really meet them in between other than for some regulatory cleanup, right? And that's it. I think that's going to change. I mean, I think most startups, unless they really scale massively, don't even have a real true in-house counsel and a team and all of that. I think this is going to be hugely different. And I think this, this need to kind of be at the table is going to be dramatically different going forward, especially for those that are innovating on the tech front. I also think the interfaces that law firms present 5 years from now will be very, very different. It won't be about, come in and let's have a meeting. It will be very digital. It'll be a SaaS product. It'll be, I want to see everything on a screen in my app. Everything will be a dashboard of some kind. It won't be the soft touch, thing. I think there'll be some of that, but it'll be very different than it is today, I think. technology renaissance, right? I think you're going to have that for sure. I think this is probably something that's a given for you all. But I think law firms will look like technology firms. They should. They shouldn't look like law firms. When you go in there, it should be, you'll need to have lots of quants and geeks on your team, way more than you'll need the lawyers from the law schools, I think, going forward. I think just knowledge of cases won't matter as much because Alexa will tell you what that is. What's the perfect case for this? What's the prior art on this? Whatever, ... You'll be able to discover that very quickly. So some of the valued kind of training that you go through will be very different going forward. I think the process will be extremely automated. In fact, the law firm that's not automated will be falling behind, and the clients will recognize that immediately because they will lose cases. They will just, there will be bad outcomes, and that will be a direct representation, a result of the lack of technology on the back end that's aiding the counsel, right? I think self-serve law will come in a big way. I think 90% of the things we do, I should be able to self-serve, and with obviously some framework or parameter that kind of envelopes that. The business model, I think, it'll be online platforms. I think the future consumers of legal services will want to go and look up something on a platform, see a rating, see outcomes, look it up on the blockchain. How did this attorney do on cases that are similar to my case before I'll hire that person? I want to cherry pick the best lawyer at the law firm, and I want to talk to the partner and then get time and materials billed for a whole bunch of people who are not really the expert. I want to know that person's the expert, and that's the person I'm paying the bucks for. That's the person who's going to argue my case. That's the person who's going to draft the argument, right? That's going to be huge. I think it's going to be ROI-driven, right? And outcome-driven. And it's going to help law firms, I think. I really think, it'll empower you. It'll free you up from having to worry about running the law firm the way you do today. You'll make it all outcome-based, value-based. Even people's compensation will be like that. It'll be an eBay of skills, people, and you'll aggregate them for a certain case, and then it'll disaggregate as needed. People will be pulled in on the fly, right, from different, across the globe. And I think this is where iTech law, could help as well. If, for instance, Rupa or Rahul need to build out a case for something, they just go to a directory of some kind. It may be you all build this platform, pull everything in, and then you have the right people writing the right arguments and pulling in the right things, right? I think, this is going to be a big thing. I think lawyers are going to have to predict the case, the outcome, before it goes to court or before it goes to the arbitration table. And those that are able to do a better job of that, because if you can predict, not just say yes, every lawyer tells you you're going to win, right? Every lawyer tells you that, but both sides are being told that with equal ferocity or passion. And, but there's if you look at all the data in aggregate, you should be able to predict who's going to win or what the outcome is going to be. And that's going to be key, I think, because clients are going to say, what was the prediction? What was the outcome? What's the correlation? That's going to be the rating for that law firm going forward. Is tell me ahead of time. Because if you don't tell me ahead of time, you don't have all the data. If the other firm can tell me that better, I'm going to them. And they can prove it. I think this might be just a business model in itself for a law firm. To say, I can predict, and my predictions are extremely accurate. Even if you predict I'm going to lose, it's actually a benefit to me because I can settle now, right? So don't just tell me I'm going to win. It's much better to tell me what the real outcome will be, given all the data. I think that's a huge thing going forward. Challenges abound. It's just from a digital perspective, I went from, I think this is true of most of us, thinking news was elegant editorial, right, with kind of really hard-hitting journalism. We've now gone to kind of, I then thought, okay, it's going to be the wisdom of the crowds, but oftentimes it's like the fury of the mob, right, the digital mob, and, online, right? So I think, we've now gone to a state where it's very hard to tell what is real, what's not. I know you all are having a panel soon on fake news and all that, but it's very hard as an individual to sift through this. I don't think the platforms themselves do it. I think there are too many bad actors and there's too many reckless intermediaries who are not aligned with actually what is fake and what is not, and who have no incentive, negative deterrent for bad behavior and bad content. I think regulations, by the way, I know this is about tech regulations and everything, but I think we're going to get to the point where regulations are going to feel irrelevant, obsolete, and kind of useless because of the, how will you know what the algorithm is doing deep inside Uber's, source code? And it's doing it on the fly. It's building this hash table of some kind. It's building this GraphQL of some kind. And then you're going to say, no, it's a biased algorithm. and when you have two algorithms fighting against each other, you have in the stock market, who is following what regulation in a time scale that is measured in less than milliseconds? I don't think a lawyer or even technicians can tell you that, the smartest of them. How do you know what's going on there? How do you know what's being manipulated? And it may not even be done by intent. It may be manipulated because of the inputs into the AI system, right? And so I think it's going to be a fantastic time because I think we're going to get to the point where everybody's going to throw their hands up like we do today with fake news. Regulations don't matter practically, right? Except for a few industries. The bias, I think there'll be massive biases in all our systems, and we'll come to recognize that. And it'll be very hard to fight. These are areas that I'm worried about. And finally, this finances, right? I think with a click of a button, you can get dematerialized in the future. What do I mean by that? You can get dispossessed of everything you own with no recourse, zero recourse. You will not be able to find anybody. It'll be like, who do I call? There's nobody answering customer support. All my money's gone. What do I do, right? I really worry about this. It's going to happen. It's going to happen soon. It might be somebody writes something to the blockchain, and now everybody tells you, it's on the blockchain. What do you do? It's on the blockchain. It doesn't belong to you. And you can't get it off the blockchain. So, that's going to happen sometime to somebody, and they're going to feel in this dematerialized zone, right? In this box. And it's going to be amazing. So I'll close with two, funny stories. I know many of you all come from around the world. So, let me give you a little bit of jugaad entrepreneurship. India is really full of entrepreneurs, and we talk about the big guys, but let me talk about the small guys today, my own personal experiences, right? This is, I was driving my car around, it's a small new car, and it's my wife's car actually, and I got somebody banged me at an intersection, he was on the smartphone, he just bumped into my back of my car, right? And so I have this fender bender, my wife's out, I was like, oh shoot, now I got to get this fixed before she comes back. Anyway, I don't have the time to do it, and as I'm driving the next day, somebody is driving around and around me in a scooter. And I was like, what's this guy doing? Why is he scoping me out? I'm driving home. I park at home, and he comes and says, can I have a minute? I say, sure. I noticed you were driving behind. You have something to ask me. And he says, no, I noticed this big bump on your back. And can I help you fix it? And, I had actually called the dealer for the car. They said, yeah, you can bring it in. It'll take us, 3 or 4 days to fix it because we'll have to do all the insurance. And I was like, okay, come on, I'll do it when I have time, and I didn't have time to do it. The guy said, I said, how long will it take? He said, 15 minutes. I said, 15 minutes? You'll fix this bump? I called Maruti or whoever it was, and they said it'll be a couple of days. I have to schedule it and all that. He said, no, 15 minutes, I'll fix it. And so I said, okay, I'll go get my keys because I'd already parked and gone in. And so I went in, and they said, you can get started. And he just sits down. He has a little toolbox. He uses he had newspaper. When I came out, I was shocked. He had newspaper on fire under my car, right? He had a little bundle of newspaper. He'd set it on fire. And what he does is, and he said, don't worry, I've done this a million times. I do it 100 times a day practically. And he says he sets the bumper on fire, and then he taps it with a little screwdriver, and everything's fine. This bumper looks perfect. And I pay him, a few $100, and, now my wife will know nothing about this, right? And it's all got done. And, so I asked him, what's the business model here? He says, what I do is I just follow people with new cars. And everybody in Bangalore has a bump on the back. And so, all I do is I just go to them, and they're all frustrated about it because they just bought the car. The newer the car, the better, right? Because the frustration level is higher, and the willingness to pay is high because they've all gone through exactly the same conversation I have. So, brilliant guy is filtering his leads. And all he says is, as soon as I finish here, I'll just go stand at the traffic light, and I'll wait. In 5 minutes, I'll have my next customer. And he says, how much can you earn? He says, listen, you know what you paid me, and you know what the dealer told you. The dealer, first and foremost, the dealer will replace the whole bumper, right? They won't just do what he does. And they'll charge you an arm and a leg for that. Anyway, great entrepreneur, and I really kind of appreciated his business model a lot, right? So the real jugaad, and all he does is a little box, one matchbox, a little bit of newspaper he picks up from the road, right? Second one, I was going to the US, and my phone broke down, my iPhone. So I was like, okay, call the Apple store. I said, can you guys fix it? I want, it was in the morning. I'm